Welcome to the Rockin Wellness Podcast, the show that takes you on a voyage to better health, wellness, and happiness that will rock your world. With me, Rachel Joy Olsen, your host, your coach, and your biggest fan. Hello, friends, and welcome to the very first episode of the Rockin Wellness Podcast with me, your host, Rachel Joy Olsen. In this podcast, you'll learn a little bit about who I am, why I've started this podcast, and what you can expect as you make your way through each episode. Before we start, I want to thank you for being here with me and supporting this podcast. My goal for this podcast is for it to be a 100% listener-supported podcast, so you don't have to listen to any annoying advertisements. So if you want to support this podcast, you can head on over to my website, rjowellness.com/podcast, and offer a donation. I'd appreciate it if you could also share this podcast with anyone that you think might get value from it, and leave a review on the platform that you're listening to this podcast. As always, I'm grateful for your support in any way. The goal of this podcast is to share with you all the knowledge and experience I've gained in 30 years in the health and wellness profession. It's my mission in this life to serve people who are interested in learning the best way to live a healthy, happy, and abundant life, and that's why I'm here with you today. In each episode, I will share a different topic on health, wellness, fitness, nutrition, mindfulness, yoga, pretty much anything and everything you can use to further your journey to better health, wellness, and happiness. Some episodes you may find will resonate with you more than others, so I encourage you to take from each episode what you need and release the rest, as not all of the information will be for you personally. You may also find that there are some topics or suggestions you don't always agree with, and that is okay too. I believe it's important to have conversations about all topics and be open-minded to all points of view to gain a better understanding of how others may think differently to you. Occasionally, I will invite guests to join me on the show for a conversation on a specific topic that they are an expert in, to bring in variety and more value to you. If you have someone in mind who you think might be a great guest, or perhaps you yourself would like to join the show, I encourage you to let me know by emailing my team at admin@whiteravenmanagement.com. Now that our housekeeping is out of the way, why don't I move on to tell you a little about me and why I'm here with you today. As I've mentioned, I've been in the health and fitness and nutrition and wellness profession for 30 years now. Wow, how time flies. And I've worked with hundreds of individuals just like you, looking for help to sift through all the confusion and, excuse my language here, but the BS that exists in the media and frankly, even in scientific studies about the best way to gain better health and wellness. Nutrition and health are very much like politics and religion. Everyone has their own opinion, and people love to fight and defend what they believe in if better information comes along. It's crazy. Well, I currently specialize in helping people, women mostly, to gain more love, compassion, and respect for themselves. I guess I mostly work with women because, sadly, do women ever hate themselves? And I was one of them. I used to look in the mirror and pretty much get physically ill over what I was looking at in the mirror. Luckily, as you'll learn over time, I've been able to get out of that poisonous headspace and now look in the mirror and go, damn girl, you're all right. Let's be friends. Of course, some days are better than others, but I always look for something nice to say about myself and work on releasing judgment and negative thoughts. These crappy thoughts just hold us back and keep us thinking that we're fat, even if we're not. Actually, it was funny. I was looking back in an old video I had posted online a while ago. It was a short cooking class that I did on Facebook Live a few years ago, and I thought, wow, was I ever lean back then? It would have been so easy in that moment to just spin out of control into a spiral of self-hatred as to why I'm not as lean as I once was, and I would have done that back then. But now, I can just smile and look back at all the knowledge I've gained, the wisdom, I guess you could say, with age, and the people that I've helped through the years, and truly be okay with where I am right now. Everyone has baggage. Everyone has a history. It may be baggage from childhood and dealing with your parents or from adult relationships gone wrong. And, well, for me, I'm pretty sure self-hatred started as a child. I grew up in a great home, yet an interesting home. On one hand, I was loved and had amazing parents and grandparents who loved me dearly. On the other hand, I had a schizophrenic father who could burst into a fit of violence at any time, resulting in everyone running after him and leaving my sister and I to fend for ourselves. However, I truly believe that every experience that comes to us over the years happens for a reason. Each experience is there to teach us a lesson and make us who we are today. Take me, for example. I went from being a self-conscious, terrified to speak in public young adult to being a published author, speaker, and a business owner. I came from a time when being raised on a farm meant chicken butchering days were mandatory, to being an advocate for the ethical treatment of animals and living a vegan lifestyle. And from being a sugar addict and dealing with an eating disorder to being a health and wellness coach who's helped hundreds of people gain better health, wellness, and happiness. My life has definitely been a wild ride so far, but it's been worth it, and it's made me who I am today, and I'm grateful for it. My love for taking care of my body started when I was introduced to weightlifting in high school gym class. I'll take you on a little journey of the past into kind of where this all began. It's this weightlifting back in high school sparked a love of fitness that is with me to this day. Back then, I had no idea I wanted to help people gain better health as a career. I honestly thought I was either going to be a hairdresser or a horse trainer, but neither of those panned out. I left high school as soon as I got the bare minimum credits to graduate, as I really didn't like high school, and ran off to work with my grandfather who trained thoroughbred racehorses. But after a few years of doing that, although I loved the horses, I realized if I wanted a real career that paid well and didn't require me to be up at 5 a.m. every day, I better get my butt back in school. So I went back to school. I graduated from the University of Calgary with a Bachelor of Science, majoring in mind sciences and kinesiology, which is really just a fancy term for sports psychology. Right out of university, I worked as a kinesiologist in a chronic disease management program, where I learned a lot about how to deal with chronic diseases, what causes many of these conditions, and I was able to teach people how to use healthy lifestyle choices to manage their condition. It was a fantastic job right out of university. Around the same time, actually probably just before I started working there, I started personal training at a local gym part-time, and this began my 3-decade career as a personal trainer and health coach, and here I am still to this day. I've always loved to learn, so over the last 3 decades, I've also graduated with a master in business and started 2 companies, my health and wellness company, R.J.O Wellness Consulting, and White Raven Management Consulting. This is where I offer business development services to artists. I've also acquired numerous certifications, including clinical exercise physiologist, health and spiritual life coach, plant-based nutrition coach, behavior change and weight management specialist, yoga instructor, and more. I truly believe that life is nothing more than an ongoing university, and I'll continue to learn and take courses until the day my soul decides it's had enough of this crazy planet. But the cool thing about all this knowledge that I've gained over the years is now I can share it with you. As I mentioned earlier, I've always loved lifting weights. So in my early 20s, to get more serious about my training, I decided to train for a figure competition. Figure is a division of bodybuilding that requires women to have a more natural physique. I knew a few people who were training for these types of events and was introduced to a brilliant trainer. Him and I became great friends, and he helped me train my body for these competitions. The workouts were killer. I actually remember when I first started training like this. Every morning I felt like I'd literally been hit by a truck. I was so sore. But I kept at it. The problem was I was still struggling with energy due to my poor diet. So I always thought I ate well, but knowing what I know now, I absolutely did not. And it's no wonder I felt so terrible. But at the time, he put me on a typical bodybuilding diet that included a lot of chicken or fish, minimal carbs, and some sort of green veggie like broccoli or green beans. Everything had to be very bland, and I couldn't add sauce or seasonings due to the extra calories and salt. I followed the diet for a few months, but found myself falling off of the wagon numerous times, cheating more and more as time went on. My trainer often questioned why my body wasn't changing as fast as it should be, but I said, I didn't know. Well, I did know. I wasn't following his diet plan consistently. I had major sugar cravings that I succumbed to on a regular basis and struggled with binge eating when I was emotional. He soon figured out that I was struggling with an eating disorder and suggested that I stop the diet until I could get myself some help. And I agreed. Things had gotten so bad at that time. I remember there was this one time and I was extremely upset about a personal issue. I came home and pretty much ate everything I could get my hands on. I was so full that I thought my stomach was literally going to burst. It was so bad I had to call in sick to work the next day. It was awful, and I knew I really needed to get some help. I started seeing a counselor for my body image and eating disorder issues. She helped me a lot. I started finding comfort in things other than food and began to develop a healthier relationship to food by learning to prepare more delicious and healthy meals. Which is really cool about this because it was preparing those meals that led me to writing my books, which you'll hear about, I'm sure, as time goes on. But during this time, I kept up with my workouts and thought I was ready to start training for another competition. So back on the diet I went. After a couple of weeks of following the diet perfectly, I noticed that I was severely bloated. I was breaking out in acne and my digestive flow had completely stopped. My trainer told me that this could be normal because there isn't much fiber in the diet and suggested maybe I take a laxative. Man, I was not comfortable doing this, but ended up having to give in and gave them a try. Not too long after this, it was my mom's birthday and we had a celebration filled with delicious food. I was allowed a cheat meal once a week, so of course I stuffed myself with pork ribs amongst lots of other things. After this meal, I was so sick, I couldn't even take it anymore. My digestion completely shut down. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I knew something was wrong. I was so bloated. I was so sick. This is when I started to get really serious about finding out what I could do to help my digestion feel better because I just couldn't take it anymore. Of course, I love to read. So in my quest for knowledge to enhance my health, I came across a book that started my transition to a plant-based lifestyle. In this book, the author recommended a diet rich in plant-based foods and as close to vegetarian as possible. So I thought, I'm going to give it a try. So I stopped the meat-heavy bodybuilding diet and gave it a try. I started by cutting out red meat. At first I craved it, especially in the summer when my friends would fire up the barbecue and cook a filet mignon to perfection. However, when I made the choice that feeling better was worth denying the fleeting satisfaction of tasting the meat, it became much easier to stay away from it. Soon after that, I cut out all poultry. For quite some time, I did continue to eat fish, eggs, and dairy, yet my digestive problems still persisted, although not quite as bad. Lactose and casein, two proteins in dairy, often cause symptoms like pain, cramping, and bloating in the digestive tract, which I experienced often after eating those things. But I did not want to give up dairy, as foods like cheese, yogurt, and milk chocolate were my absolute favorite. And when I speak to my clients, they often say, I can't give up my cheese. But at the time, I was desperate. And luckily nowadays, it's a little easier because there's so many great dairy-free options out there. But back then, it was a little harder. But I had to get rid of those stomach aches. So I let it go. And within 3 days of cutting out dairy, my stomach and intestines felt noticeably better. This sparked my curiosity, so I began to study the effects of dairy on the body and was shocked to find out that it causes mucus buildup and a ton of other problems. Knowing that the issues dairy caused in the body are mostly due to so many gross things like infection, pus, steroids, and other toxins contaminated in the products from conventional farming methods, I knew immediately I had to cut out dairy products forever to avoid negative health effects. And of course, over our time together, we'll go through some of those other options, of course, that, it's mostly conventional farming. Of course, that's the big issue nowadays, but we'll get into that later. After a few months, I finally began to lose weight and see positive changes in my body composition. I was working out hard, felt great, and my stomach aches had diminished. Sometimes I still had some digestive distress, but for the most part, the regular pain was gone. It was now time to take my diet to the next level. As a personal trainer and fitness enthusiast, I had always been interested in the bodybuilding industry. Sadly, due to my food and sugar addictions and trouble digesting the vast amount of meat that seemed to be required, I was never able to lean out enough to stand on the stage. I knew that going back to eating meat was not an option, so I decided to try it again as a vegetarian. Luckily, after a lot of searching, I found a fitness pro in Toronto who was a raw vegan and willing to coach me to the stage. A raw vegan diet is one where all food consumed is raw or cooked at temperatures below 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll discuss a little bit more later on about various types of vegetarianism, veganism, and even some reasons why people choose to eat this way in future podcasts. But after speaking with this trainer, I knew he would be the one to help me transform my body and help me lean out enough to stand on the stage and finally realize my goal as a figure competitor. I was still eating fish and eggs, so he suggested that I cut out those foods and go completely vegan. Actually, he said I had to, or otherwise I couldn't work with him. But I had always been curious about eating a diet that was 100% plant-based or vegan, but I just wasn't sure I knew enough about how to get the right balance of nutrients at the time I needed to be healthy. He promised he would help make the transition easy and show me what I needed to know to be successful. I quickly learned that many of the foods I was already eating, such as spinach, kale, and other leafy greens, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, were providing me with high amounts of protein and other essential nutrients. These plant-based foods proved to be easier to digest and were much more satisfying to me than any of the animal-based foods that I was eating. Over the next 4 months, I lost about 25 pounds and was so close to competition. My muscles were defined. I had the lowest percentage of body fat that I'd ever had in my life. I can still remember and see the pictures in my mind. And 4 weeks out of the stage, my coach decided to place me on an all-juice fast, which he believed would help me lose the last little bit of fat I still carried in my belly and my glutes and my legs. For 10 days, I juiced a variety of green veggies and apples and continued to train hard in the gym. This was one of the hardest things I'd ever done in my life because food had always been comforting to me. I actually just missed the act of eating. My social life seemed to be slipping away because I couldn't go out and enjoy food and drink anymore, and I became more and more unhappy. Although I was leaning out and losing more weight, I continued to look in the mirror and hated what I saw. 2 weeks from the big competition day, I asked my coach if he thought I'd be able to lose the last little bit of fat I still carried in my belly. And he said that from what he saw in my pictures, he didn't think I would be ready. So, even though I had worked so hard the last 3.5 months, had almost lost 30 pounds, was leaner than ever before, I decided to quit. I came off that juice fast, feeling like a failure, and it threw me right back into my old habits. I started eating heavy foods way too fast, foods such as nuts and seeds, sugar, and other junk food, because I'd been deprived for so long. And of course, because of that, it didn't take long before all my hard work was gone. I was 25 pounds heavier again, almost overnight, right back to where I had started. Then I knew my emotional eating, lack of self-love and self-esteem was still a big problem. I'd allowed my negative emotions and my skewed view of my body to take over. However, I recognized the great benefits that I saw over the previous months of my training. My digestion was improving and I had a lot more energy. And even though I would not step on the stage, I knew that I would eat a plant-based diet for the rest of my life. So I became a certified vegan nutritionist and chef to inspire others to take control of their own health and wellness with this kind of diet. That's what I mean. Everything happens for a reason. I was led to this lifestyle for a reason. Eating a plant-based diet for health reasons is a great idea and one which I am so grateful to have found. However, being vegan was a different ballgame and, it isn't for everyone. So I'm not sitting here, in judgment or saying everybody has to, eat a vegan diet. It is not for everyone. But when I decided to eat a plant-based diet for health, it was easy at times to cheat and eat dairy once in a while or eat fish at a friend's place just so I wasn't being rude. But when I started doing my research on what it meant to be vegan ethically, this is when my life really changed. And I'll speak more about this in future podcasts when we will kind of go over together where our food comes from and, what it means to us. And of course, some of these topics are hard to hear and discuss, but again, it's important to be aware and understand these important topics so that we can be more informed consumers. And, I'm not just talking about our meat products. There is so many aspects of the food industry that if we're just aware, we can make better choices. So we'll talk about that in later episodes. But as I add up all the experiences that I've had in my life and my love for fitness and food, this brings me right here, right now, recording this podcast for you. So now that you know a little bit more about me, of course, just a little tiny bit about the beginning of my journey. And of course, my journey today is very different than what it was back then, but that is where it all started. I want you to know that I'm here to take you on a voyage to better health and wellness that will rock your world. You'll learn things on this podcast about nutrition, fitness, and living a life of love and compassion for yourself and others that may be new to you. And I will kickstart you to seeing many positive benefits. You may agree with what I say, or you may not. Either way, it's absolutely okay. My goal is to have candid conversations, teach you a little bit about what I've learned that's helped me personally, as well as what has helped my clients over the years, and just really help you rock the life you've always wanted. After each episode, I will post extra links and information on the show notes at rjowellness.com/podcast to give you more value from each podcast. And I want to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or simply want to connect, follow me on my socials, which you can find on my website. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Rockin Wellness Podcast. Make sure to visit my website at www.rjowellness.com, where you can subscribe to the show and check out all the show notes. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about it, that would help out too. You may choose to join the R.J.O. Wellness community to take advantage of the freebies, courses, and coaching that will take your voyage to the next level, or support this podcast with your monthly membership. Until next time, my friends, keep rocking your wellness.